I am small. I want you to understand that first, because everything else in this story only makes sense once you understand how small I really am. I can fit inside a human hand. My wings, when I open them all the way, are shorter than one human finger. When I sneeze, small sparks come out instead of fire, and even the sparks seem embarrassed by how tiny they are. My kind are called Skarathi. We were never built to be big or strong. We were built to be quick, quiet, and very good at hiding in small spaces. That last part turned out to be a problem. My human is named Ren. She found me on a space station called Calder 9, inside a broken supply crate, half frozen and tangled in packing foam. I was hissing at a piece of foam like it had done something terrible to me. Ren was doing repair work that day, wearing a big metal suit that did not fit her well. She was not supposed to bring home strange life forms from space. That was against the rules. But she looked at me for a long moment, then wrapped her glove gently around my body and said, out loud, to no one, "Well, you are not going back out there." That was 4 years ago. I have been getting lost ever since. I want to say, clearly, that most of it was not my fault. Calder 9 is a huge station. It has more than 100 rooms, 6 cargo bays, and an entire lower level that was closed after a coolant leak, then opened again because someone decided it was probably safe now. There are thousands of small spaces on this station that are exactly the right size for a creature like me to squeeze into, and almost none of them are a good idea to squeeze into. I have gotten stuck inside air vents. I have fallen asleep inside a boot. Once, I spent a whole night inside a warm machine because it hummed like a heartbeat, and I woke up surrounded by workers holding a net, while Ren shouted at all of them to be careful with me. Humans, I learned quickly, can be very serious about the things they choose to love. At first, I did not understand Ren at all. Skarathi do not belong to anyone. We do not sit still when we are told. We do not answer to names, at least not right away. For the first few weeks, I stayed away from her as much as I could inside such a small living space. I watched her from high shelves and dark corners. I studied the way she moved, the way she talked to herself when she thought no one could hear, the way she left a small dish of food out every night, without ever demanding that I come near it. She never grabbed for me. She never chased me into corners. When I hid, she would simply say, in a soft voice, "All right, I will see you later then," and go back to whatever she was doing. It took me a long time to understand that this patience was its own kind of gift. She was giving me the choice to stay. One night, during a storm that shook the outer hull of the station, I could not sleep. Storms in space are strange things. They are not wind and rain like the old pictures in human books. They are waves of energy that hit the shields and make the whole station groan like a giant waking up. The sound frightened me more than I wanted to admit. I flew down from my hiding spot near the ceiling vents and landed on Ren's shoulder without meaning to. She did not jump. She did not grab me. She simply reached up, very slowly, and let one finger rest near my side, close enough to comfort but not close enough to trap. "It is loud, isn't it?" she whispered. "I don't like it either." We sat like that for a long time, listening to the station groan around us, until the storm passed. After that night, something between us changed. I stopped hiding as much. I started sitting near her while she worked, watching her fix machines with tools too big for her small hands, listening to her hum songs that sounded old and a little sad and a little happy at the same time. Life on Calder 9 became something close to normal. Ren worked long shifts fixing broken systems, checking air filters, and walking through metal hallways that echoed with every step. I rode in her coat pocket sometimes, my head poking out just enough to see the world go by. Other workers on the station learned my name. Some of them liked me. A few of them thought I was strange, or too small to be useful, but none of them ever tried to take me from her. Ren made sure of that, in the same fierce, quiet way she made sure of everything. But even with all her care, I kept disappearing. It was not on purpose. My kind are pulled toward shiny things and warm, dark places the way some humans are pulled toward arguing with strangers online. I could not always help myself. There was the time I found a gap behind the wall panels in the science lab and did not come out for 6 hours, chasing the warm hum of old wiring. There was the time I climbed inside a supply crate heading to the lower deck and almost got shipped to another station entirely, only to be found at the very last second by a worker who recognized the small bell-like sound I would later come to wear. Yes, the bell. That story matters most of all. It happened on a market day. Calder 9 has a lower deck where traders come to sell food, tools, and small treasures brought in from other parts of the galaxy. It smells like hot oil, strange spices, and sometimes real coffee, shipped in from somewhere green and far away. Ren liked to walk through the market on her days off, and I liked to ride in her coat pocket, watching everything with wide eyes. That day, a trader's cart rolled past too fast, and something small and bright fell off the edge and rolled under a stack of crates. I do not remember deciding to chase it. I simply found myself moving before I had time to think, slipping out of Ren's pocket and darting across the floor toward the shining object. It was a bell, a very old, very small bell, made of brass that had turned soft and green with age. It was tiny enough that a human might call it a charm rather than an instrument. When I nudged it with my nose, it made a small, quiet sound, almost like a tiny laugh with no breath behind it. I sat there in the dust beneath the crates for a long moment, listening to that little sound, and I thought to myself, this is the most wonderful thing I have ever found, and I am never giving it up. Ren noticed I was missing only a few minutes later, but a few minutes is a long time on a station with thousands of hiding spots. She told me afterward that she stood in the middle of the crowded market and called my name over and over, as if sound alone could somehow undo all that space between us. I did not hear her at first. I was too busy admiring my new treasure. When I finally crawled out from under the crates with the bell held carefully in my mouth, I found her standing very still, eyes wide, hands shaking just slightly. She did not scold me. She knelt down, picked me up gently, and looked at the little bell for a long moment. "Where did you find this?" she asked, not really expecting an answer, since I could not speak her language in words, only in small sounds and gestures she had slowly learned to understand. That night, back in our quarters, she washed the bell carefully with warm water and a soft cloth until it shined a little brighter than before. Then she found a thin cord in the maintenance supplies, threaded it through the tiny loop at the top of the bell, and tied it gently around my neck. The knot was soft. It did not pull or pinch. It simply rested there, light as a whisper. "There," she said. "Now I will always know." I did not fully understand what she meant, not right away. I only knew that the bell made a small, pleasant sound whenever I moved, a sound I found strangely comforting. It became part of me almost immediately, the way a favorite blanket becomes part of a child, or the way an old song becomes part of a memory. I understood the true meaning of the bell only a few days later, during one of my usual disappearing adventures. I had squeezed into a narrow gap behind the hydroponics bay, chasing a small moth that did not deserve nearly as much attention as I was giving it. The gap was tighter than I expected, and for a moment, I could not move forward or backward. Panic began to rise in my chest, quick and sharp. Then I heard something in the hallway above, footsteps, stopping. And then, faint and tinny, but unmistakable, I heard it too. My own bell, ringing softly with every small movement I made as I tried to wiggle free. Tink, tink, tink. The footsteps above me grew closer, and then Ren's voice, filled with relief, drifted down through the gap in the wall. "There you are." She had not seen me. She could not see me at all, hidden in that tight metal space. But she had heard me. The bell had spoken for me when I could not speak for myself. I have thought about that moment more than a creature my size probably should. Humans do not have very sharp hearing, not compared to my kind. They cannot hear the low groan a wall makes just before it cracks. They cannot hear another creature's heartbeat through a few centimeters of metal, the way Skarathi can. In many ways, humans are almost deaf compared to us. And yet, this is the thing about humans that surprised me the most. Wherever they are lacking in one way, they simply build something to make up for it. Ren could not hear my tiny footsteps, so soft they barely counted as sound at all. So instead, she gave me a bell, and now I ring loud enough for a species that struggles to hear almost anything. After that day, I began wearing the bell everywhere, without even needing to think about it. Not because Ren asked me to. She never once tried to force me into anything. Skarathi do not answer well to commands, and to her credit, she never treated me as though I owed her obedience. I wore the bell because of what happened only a few weeks later, an event that changed how I understood both danger and trust. It happened during a routine system check. Ren had been sent to inspect the water filtration unit on the lower level, a large metal chamber filled with pipes, filters, and warm humming machines. I came along, riding quietly in her coat pocket as usual, more curious than cautious. While she worked, checking readings on a small device, I slipped away to explore a gap near the base of the filtration housing. It was warm there, and the hum of the machine felt strangely soothing, almost like a heartbeat. I do not remember falling asleep. I only remember waking up much later, surrounded by a strange, heavy darkness, the hum of the machine much louder and closer than before. I had drifted, in my sleep, deeper into the housing than I realized, past a maintenance panel that had shifted closed behind me. I was trapped. At first, I told myself it was nothing, I would find my way out soon enough. But minutes turned into what felt like hours, and no matter which direction I tried, the metal walls around me refused to open. The warmth that once felt comforting began to feel suffocating. I called out, but my voice was far too small to carry through solid metal. Then, faintly, I heard something. Ren's voice, muffled through layers of metal, calling my name. Not calm this time, not steady, frightened. I moved as much as I could inside that narrow space, and every small movement made my little bell ring out, tink, 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 bouncing softly against the metal walls around me. It was such a small sound. I did not know if it could travel far enough to be heard through so much steel and wiring. But Ren has always had a way of hearing things that matter most. I heard her voice grow louder, closer, more certain. I heard other footsteps join hers, and worried voices asking what was wrong. I heard someone say the words sealed maintenance panel, and I heard tools being gathered. Through it all, I kept moving, kept ringing that little bell as loudly as such a small thing could manage, a tiny signal in a very large, very dark space. It felt like a very long time before the panel finally opened, letting in a rush of cooler air and bright light that made me blink and shrink back for a moment. Then I saw her face, pale and worried, reaching in carefully to lift me out. She did not say anything at first. She simply held me close, her hands trembling slightly, and I could feel her heartbeat racing beneath her uniform, fast and uneven, slowly calming as she breathed out a long, shaky breath. "I heard you," she finally whispered. "I heard the bell." I have never in my life felt smaller than I did in that dark, sealed space, unable to speak, unable to be seen, with only a tiny metal bell standing between silence and rescue. And I have never felt more certain of anything than I did in that moment, held safely against her chest, that I never wanted to be that silent again. From that day forward, the bell became more than a treasure I had found by chance. It became a promise, one that I chose to keep for myself and for her. Life on Calder 9 continued much as it always had, though I noticed small changes in how I moved through the station afterward. I still explored. I still let my curiosity carry me into strange corners and warm, humming machines. But now, wherever I went, I made sure my bell rang clearly and often. Tink, 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 echoing through vents and hallways, announcing my presence to a world that could not always see me but could almost always hear me, especially the one person who mattered most. Other workers on the station grew used to the sound as well. They began to say things like, "There goes the little dragon," whenever they heard the faint ringing pass by overhead or underfoot. Some of them started leaving small treats near vents they thought I liked to explore, though none of them ever came close to replacing the comfort I found simply being near Ren. As the months passed, I began to understand something important about the bond between us, something that went far beyond simple survival or convenience. Ren did not keep me because she needed a pet, or because Skarathi were rare and interesting creatures worth studying. She kept me because, somewhere in that first frozen moment inside a broken supply crate, she had decided I mattered, and every choice she made afterward, from the quiet patience in those early weeks to the careful knot she tied around my neck, was simply proof of that first decision, repeated again and again, in small, steady ways. There was one more test of that bond, though, one that neither of us expected. It happened almost a year after the water filtration incident, during what should have been an ordinary supply delivery day. A cargo ship had docked at Calder 9, bringing food, equipment, and parts needed to keep the station running smoothly. Ren was assigned to help unload and organize the shipment, a job that kept her busy from early morning until late into the evening. I had grown a little braver by then, a little more confident in my ability to explore without getting lost for long. I decided to investigate the cargo bay while Ren worked, weaving between large containers and stacked crates, my bell ringing softly with each small movement. Somewhere between one row of crates and the next, I found a small gap leading into an unused storage container, one that had been pushed aside and forgotten among the busy activity of the delivery. Curiosity, as always, got the better of me. I slipped inside to explore, only to hear, moments later, the heavy sound of the container door sliding shut, sealing me inside complete darkness. I did not panic right away. I told myself this was simply another small adventure, another tight space I would soon find my way out of. But as the minutes passed, and the container remained sealed, a familiar fear began to creep back into my chest. I remembered the filtration unit. I remembered the darkness, the trapped feeling, the long wait before rescue. But this time, I remembered something else too. I remembered the bell. Instead of letting fear take over completely, I began to move deliberately, shaking my body gently from side to side. letting the little bell ring out again and again into the sealed darkness. Tink, tink, tink. I did not know if anyone could hear me through the thick walls of the container, but I kept going anyway, because doing something felt far better than doing nothing at all. Outside, though I could not know it at the time, Ren had already noticed my bell was no longer ringing nearby. She told me later that the silence itself had worried her more than any sound could have. She began searching immediately, calling my name through the busy cargo bay, asking other workers if they had seen a small dragon with a soft ringing bell. It took nearly half an hour before someone finally heard the faint, steady tink, tink, tink coming from inside the sealed storage container. Ren reached it just moments later, her hands quick and careful as she worked the heavy latch open. When the door finally slid aside, letting in a rush of bright light and noisy activity from the cargo bay, I practically leaped into her waiting hands, my bell ringing loudly with relief. "You clever little thing," she said, laughing softly even as her eyes shone with unshed tears. "You kept ringing. You knew I was listening." I had. Somewhere deep inside, without fully understanding why, I had trusted that as long as I kept making noise, as long as I kept ringing that small brass bell, she would find me. That trust had grown slowly over 4 years, built from countless small moments of patience, care, and quiet devotion. After that second incident, Ren decided to make a small addition to my bell, something she called a tracker, a tiny device barely larger than a grain of rice, that could send a signal to her handheld communicator if I ever wandered too far or stayed hidden too long. I did not mind this addition at all. If anything, it felt like one more thread connecting us, one more way for her to find me when the world felt too big and too dark. Life continued on Calder 9, filled with small adventures, quiet evenings, and the steady comfort of routine. I grew a little bigger, though never by much, Skarathi being naturally small creatures no matter how much time passes. Ren grew a little older too, her hair showing a few more strands of gray, her hands growing steadier and more skilled with each passing year of station work. Through it all, the bell remained. I wore it during quiet mornings when Ren made her tea and hummed old songs to herself. I wore it during busy afternoons when she fixed broken machines with tools too large for her hands but never too large for her patience. I wore it during storms that shook the station's outer hull, storms that no longer frightened me quite as much, because I knew that no matter how loud the world became, my small bell could still be heard by the one person who mattered most. Sometimes, late at night, when the station grew quiet and the hallways dimmed for the sleeping cycle, I would sit on Ren's shoulder and listen to the soft, steady sound of my own bell as she walked slowly back to our quarters after a long shift. Tink, tink, tink. Such a small sound, so easily lost among the noise of a busy station, and yet, somehow, always heard. I think often about what it means to be small in a universe so impossibly large. Skarathi were never built to be strong or powerful. We were built to hide, to survive quietly in the shadows of bigger, louder creatures. For a long time, I believed that being small meant being forgotten, easily lost, easily overlooked. But Ren taught me something different. She taught me that being small does not mean being unheard. It simply means finding the right way to make your voice carry, even when your voice itself is too quiet to reach very far on its own. A little brass bell, tied gently around my neck with a soft cord, and even softer love, became my voice in a world too big and too loud for me to be heard any other way. Humans often speak proudly about the impossible things their kind has accomplished. Ships that should not be able to fly across the stars, but do. Difficult problems solved through stubborn determination and clever new ideas. Impossible situations survived through sheer, unbending willpower. I have heard workers on this station brag about such things many times, calling themselves proof that humanity can accomplish anything it puts its mind to. I do not disagree with them. I have seen enough of what humans can build and overcome to believe every word. But if you ask me what I admire most about humanity, it is not the great ships or the clever inventions or the impossible victories against difficult odds. It is something much smaller, much quieter, and in my opinion far more important than any of those things. It is a woman who could not hear the soft, quiet footsteps of a tiny, frightened creature hiding in the wreckage of a broken crate, and who decided, in that very first moment, that she would find a way to hear me anyway. It is a small brass bell, worn soft and green with age, cleaned gently with careful hands, and tied around my neck not as a leash, not as a way to control me, but as a promise that I would never again be lost without someone listening for the sound of my return. It is every single time, across 4 long years, that Ren stopped whatever she was doing the moment she heard that little bell fall silent, and did not rest until she heard it ringing safely again. That, to me, is the truest kind of strength. Not the strength of great ships or powerful machines, but the quiet, patient strength of choosing to listen, even when listening is difficult, even when the thing you are listening for is impossibly small and easy to overlook. I am still small. I will always be small. My wings will never grow large enough to carry me far, and my voice will never grow loud enough to be heard across a crowded room without help. But I am no longer afraid of being small, because I have learned that being small simply means finding someone willing to listen closely enough to hear you anyway. So now, wherever I go across the busy halls and quiet corners of Calder 9, I go loud, in my own small way. Tink, 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 a tiny, stubborn sound entirely too big for a creature my size, announcing to anyone listening that I am here, that I am safe, and that somewhere nearby, a woman built from patience, stubbornness, and the fiercest kind of quiet love, is listening for me. Just as she always has. If you ever find yourself wondering what makes humans worth admiring, do not look only at their great ships or their clever machines or their impossible victories. Look instead at the small, quiet moments. Look at a woman kneeling beside a broken crate, choosing to save something small enough to be easily ignored. Look at a tiny brass bell, tied with careful hands around the neck of a frightened little dragon. Look at every single time someone stopped, listened closely, and said, softly, with relief and love in their voice, "There you are." That, more than anything else, is the story I wanted to tell you. I am here. I am always here. Just follow the sound of the bell, and you will find me.